Welcome to the acrepro.com weekday conversation. A little bit different than our usual format for this, but obviously the news of the day, Jeff Brohm has taken the job at Louisville. He will be heading down to Louisville here, probably by the end of the day today. If I don't know when his actual announcement's going to be. And no real surprise based on the last 24, 48 hours of this, but yet there is some finality to all this. And Tom, I'll start with you, just your initial reaction to what has gone down at this point.
Yeah, I guess not a surprise, right? There always seemed to be an air of inevitability that this day was coming. And we almost saw it happen, obviously, in 2018. And here it is, guys. This sort of came out of the blue Monday morning, early Monday mornings when the Scott Satterfield news broke. Caught everybody by surprise, I'm guessing. Maybe they knew this was in the works too, but regardless of that, the job opened up and people make the obvious dot connections, and speculation obviously really hit full steam quickly on Monday. And here we are, guys, Wednesday, and he's gone, reportedly gone. There's been no official announcement yet, but he's reportedly gone. And yeah, and here's Purdue in the midst of a job search. So which direction they go, I don't know. We could spend 2 hours talking about possible head coaches, but just real quick on Brohm. I mean, 6 years, guys. I think he checked a lot of boxes, did a lot of good things, won a lot of games, and just got the program back on solid footing, right? Now he's gone after 6 years. He finally is going back home again. He's getting what he wanted. And I guess you just wish him the best and thank him, I think, pretty much for a job well done.
Brian, your observations, but also just kind of what this sets in motion in terms of Purdue's got a bowl game to play. Obviously, the transfer portal is going fast and furious. You have signing day. Purdue would, one would think, need to move relatively quickly if it can to hire a replacement.
Yeah, I mean, is anybody gonna? I mean, it's the transfer portal opened up yesterday. There were scenarios here where you might not have a team. Yeah. It's kind of, we don't have a lot of perspective on this type of situation because things have changed. But theoretically, you could lose a bunch, or you could have a bunch of guys put their names in the portal right away here, which might be to their interests because they could theoretically start taking official visits this weekend. You could have a bunch of guys go in the portal. You could have a bunch of coaches leave because there's no guarantee of them. There's nothing guaranteed with them here. And what's left to play in the bowl game? That's kind of the fly in the ointment for the whole bowl system, more so now than ever, is that the timing of it coming weeks after the portal opens, that just adds to the whole issue that's always been in place, where this is also coaching change season. I'm not really sure what Purdue's going to be left with here in a couple weeks. We'll kind of have to wait and see. But, I don't think Purdue's not taken by surprise here. Purdue's known the deal here for years in terms of this is how this was probably almost certainly going to end at some point in time. So they were ready for this, I'm sure, and they'll be ready to embark on a search. The bowl game, is almost, as unfortunate it is to say this, the Citrus Bowl is
of all things,
sort of a secondary story now. It's a secondary concern. The long-term viability of Purdue's program, the long-term outlook of Purdue's program, its next direction, that is now the much bigger story. But it feels like now the Citrus Bowl is just kind of an afterthought.
And again, Tom, also speculation certainly, but any feelings on who might be heading with them to Louisville from an assistant coach standpoint? It's still early, obviously. Nothing has actually been officially announced, as you guys have both pointed out. One would think he would take a lot of his Purdue coaches. That's usually what happens, but maybe not always. And yet you're going to have, and you may, any clue on who might be the interim coach for that bowl game?
Yeah, I think, a good majority of these guys are going to follow Jeff Brohm to Louisville ASAP.
Yeah.
Most of the offensive staff, I believe. Chris Barclay, obviously, is a Louisville guy. That's where he grew up. And Dale Williams has been a long-time Brohm assistant. And, Garrick McGee hired Jeff Brohm when he was the head coach at UAB there. they're good friends as well. And obviously Brian Brohm, his brother. So speaking of Brian Brohm, I'm reporting that he's going to be the interim head coach. So he will remain and to lead the program through their January 2nd Cheez-It Citrus Bowl against LSU in Orlando. Of course, Brian was the interim head coach for the season opener in 2020 when Jeff was out with COVID. Brian Brohm led Purdue to a 24-20 win that day. Defensively, guys, I think Ron English is going to go. I think Mark Hagan's deciding. Mark Hagan has been extended an invitation. He's going to have to decide quickly. Not sure about David Elson. I'm not sure if Ashton Yabodi will be invited. So just stay tuned, guys. It's going to get interesting here to see what this coaching staff looks like in 24, 48 hours. Practice is supposed to start, remember, Jeff Brohm said on next Thursday or Friday, I think the 16th and 17th or 15th and 16th. So they're about a week away from starting bowl practice, and the staff could be falling apart. They could be left with, who knows, GAs, I don't know, coaching this team. So anyway, there's just a lot of balls in the air. And, you know, Brian talked about some of the other things. There's just a lot going on in December. And now Purdue's got this thrown in its lap. So it's going to be crazy. I'd like to know what you guys think. How soon is Purdue need to get somebody in the big chair here?
Yeah. Brian?
Well, always the sooner the better, but you also don't want to half-ass the search. You want to make sure you get the right guy. I mean, nowadays you want to get him in ASAP because the portal is so important and stability is important. Recruiting remains important. But I think you also, now more than ever, you know, there's so much money involved here. There's so much money at stake. You can't mess this up. And there are going to be good hires. There's going to be bad hires. There's going to be disastrous hires. There's going to be amazing hires, just like there has always been on all four fronts. But you have to make sure that you've crossed every T and you've dotted every I, and you've looked under every couch cushion, and you want to make sure that there's nothing you don't know about these guys, because there's always going to be risk involved with the hiring process. It's the reason nobody wants to do it. It's the reason that Mel Tucker makes $1 billion a year off of one good season. It's because people don't want to lose good coaches or coaches they think are good coaches and then have to go do it all over again, because every time you do it, you're pulling the pin out of the grenade and then you're trying to put it back in. But you just want to make sure you take your time with this and you have a grasp on everything you need to have a grasp on. So you want it done ASAP, but you don't want it done too quickly so that you run the risk of having missed something very important.
Yeah, I think that's about as clear as you're going to be. One thing we do know, Purdue's going to pay, you know, at least historically, they paid Jeff Brohm this year, $5.1 million plus whatever else he made. Brom's reportedly going for $35 million for 6 years at Louisville. But it's not that money is no object, but Purdue should be able to pay pretty competitively. Tom, I'll start with you on that. I mean, it shouldn't be, no longer should be a huge hindrance like it used to be back in the day.
Should not at all. You're right. You know, given how flush these Big Ten athletic departments are going to be here very soon with all this television loot. So, and we're seeing $9 million. I think Brian talked about, you know, it's almost a new bar, the new high bar in for paying college football coaches. I don't think Purdue's going to go that high, obviously, but they can be very competitive, right? And it's on Mike Bobinski's shoulders. And like Brian said, too, nobody knows. I don't care who you are, who you know. Nobody knows if any hire is going to work out. I mean, it's
60% proposition at best. You're right.
You know how much betting you do, how many questions you ask. I don't know how many lunches you take them out to. Nobody knows. So it's always a roll of the dice. I guess my question too, Mike Bobinski's 65 years old. And how much longer is he going to work? And if you were a head coach and you're hired by Mike Bobinski, is he going to retire in a couple of years? I don't know. And there's a dynamic of a new president matter. It probably doesn't. Of course, there's a new president coming on board in January. I don't want to get off on a tangent here, but always high anxiety. Anytime there's change in life, whatever it is, right? It's high anxiety for Purdue athletics and the fan base too. So, and then like Brian talked about too, there's a lot going on. Transfer portal. I've heard all kinds of crazy stories about 15 or 20 guys jumping in. Nobody's jumped in the last few days. I think you got to wait to see what happens if you're smart at Purdue, right? But there's a lot of anxious players out there right now. They, like everybody else, wants to know what their future is going to look like, who's going to be the leader of them.
Yeah, I think one thing that's important with Purdue, and I agree, there's certainly change at President University, but the board has just been pretty rock solid about its desire to be the Mike Berghoffs of the world, the Mike Klipsches, the Gary Layman, the Joanne Briette's on down the line. Is a pretty. They know what they've invested in. They got as we've talked about, a $50 million renovation project or whatever, that $45 million. And my point is I don't think there's any concern, a commitment where that had been a case. I mean, we're talking apples and oranges in terms of timing too. We all get that. But, do you think any, the obstacles, Brian, to this, do you, if you were sitting in the athletic director's chair or whatever, one would assume it would be an offensive guy, or at least have somebody to have that's the formula at Purdue. But how do you look at that? If you were making that call, what would you look at right away?
Yeah, no, it has to be somebody who's either an offensive guy or somebody who's going to be committed to running creative offense, entertaining offense, because at the end of the day, this is still about winning games, but also selling tickets. I think up-tempo or big play offense or exciting offense, however you want to define it, I think is something that's an advantage in recruiting. I think when you're a program like Purdue, I think you need to sell your history. I think you need to have connections to certain things that you can use to try to set yourself apart from other programs like you. And I think Purdue's history at quarterback is something that Purdue needs to embrace, no matter who the coach is. And I think it's something they have to recruit toward. They have to be a quarterback-minded school. They have to be a quarterback-driven school. Things like that. Is that a deal breaker? Probably not. I don't think you're going to go find the perfect coach, but then hire a quarterback guy instead of him just because of that. But I think that it's important for Purdue to embrace that history because it's so important to set yourself apart in recruiting and in terms of just being relevant in college football, things like that. But I think the offensive piece of it's important. I think the ability to recruit in a modern age now is particularly important. I think somebody who is going to really be all in on the portal and really all in on understanding that, these guys are getting paid now. And whereas we might not be paying the players to come here, we have to understand that there's going to be some things we might have to manage eventually. We're going to have to work with a lot of different constituencies here to make this program work, kind of stuff like that. Just kind of somebody who's good to work with, somebody who's has a modern approach to things, kind of things like that. I'm trying to think of what else.
Like the NIL,
somebody with some energy, somebody with a big personality would be helpful.
Yeah.
All the standard stuff pretty much. But I think offense is important. I think recruiting is important. I think an ability to adjust to the modern climate of college football is important. And everything else kind of falls in line after that.
Yeah. I mean, I like you said, the NIL stuff, at least because in the job interviewing process, that person will have to be understood that
that's going to be the number one question.
Understand that there's an infrastructure here, and and we've talked about that in the Boilermaker Alliance, et cetera. Is that going to be a selling point? The fact that Drew Brees is involved with that probably doesn't hurt Purdue, but it's also it is not a Columbus, Ohio marketplace here, as we all understand. So that part of it, it makes for, at least it's going to be a discussion point. I agree. If I were going to sit in those shoes, I would say, yeah, you can be committed to us, but can I get players, and can I get enough to make a difference down the road and have the success that you need? Tom, any from a building standpoint, you having guys, and we have names already on our list on the site as we speak. But you look at that and you say, is part of that ingredient, you need somebody that's got that mentality of building a program. I mean, is this program, in your view, stable or built to a level that can work because of what Jeff Brohm did? How do you see that?
I don't know. I think you can, with the portal now, you can flip a roster in 1 year. I mean, there's no 3 or 4 or 5 year build, obviously, anymore. So this job has changed so much since when Jeff Brohm took it in 2017. And now just think how college football has transformed in those 6 years.
Yeah.
It doesn't look anything the same. So, and I think the job requirements have changed. And Brian talked about some of those things that are going to be necessary. Embracing this new world order of NIL and a transfer portal and a free movement. It is what it is, man. And you got to figure it out. You got to embrace it and try to make it work. And it's not just going to be the head coach. He's got to have everybody on board. I think we've hinted at that, right? University hierarchy to your collective people as well. If you want to have a good football team, everybody's got to be pushed in that same direction. So I think the Boilermaker Alliance has got a good start here. They seem like earnest people who are doing a good job. University's done its part with their name, image, and likeness as well. And I think they've shown a commitment to football. We talked about this off the top with the work going on now over at Ross-Ade Stadium. So there's plenty there for make this a great job. It's a Big Ten job, guys. And every Big Ten job is a good job. I don't care where you're at. You have a chance to succeed, I think. And we talked about the template real quick too. We all know the template you'd like to ideally have on the offensive side of the ball. Like Brian talked about, I think about the elevator pitch. If you walk in an elevator, can you tell me in 10 seconds what you are? If you can't, then you're in trouble. And people got to think Purdue, that's Purdue. That's what they do. I think we know what Purdue is in their elevator pitch. And whoever that head coach is has got to embrace that. It can be a defensive guy, but he's going to have a good staff around him. So I wouldn't shut the door off to anybody. Age, background, level of football. I think there's great coaches everywhere. But like I talked about too, it's certainly hard to make sure you got the right guy.
Yeah, there's no doubt that's going to be the challenge. How much, Brian, is Mike Babinski, and obviously a guy that's been around the block we talked about, and he's not said anything about retirement. And I get the sense he's at least 2 to 3 years out. That would be my sense, though he did turn 65 this year. But that cachet of a guy that can go out and has that ability to get people's attention. I mean, he did that last time, at a different level with getting a Jeff Brohm here, but at a time where Purdue football was a complete and utter dumpster fire. And he was able to at least secure a pretty, a coach that at least was on the rise. How big a factor is that alignment factor we've talked about, but also the fact that Mike Babinski and company know how to do this?
Yeah, I think he's got a good track record of supporting his coaches. I think, you can talk to Jeff Brohm, and you can talk to Matt Painter, and you can talk to the football and basketball coaches he's had in his time. You can talk to Sean Miller, you can talk to Chris Mack, whoever it might be. Paul Johnson, maybe not so much, but I don't know if Paul Johnson really liked anybody. There's a certain generation of football coaches that just nothing's ever enough, and they're always unhappy, and it just kind of is what it is. But I think he's got a long track record of really supporting his coaches and understanding his coaches and being there for his coaches and being somebody who's really, really good to work for. And I think he's got a personality about him. I think he's a good communicator. And I think he's good at this. I think this is kind of what he does. And I think that, he's always looked for the up and comer, and he's got he seems like he's got a good eye for it, because he's done pretty well in that regard in basketball and football. Jeff Brohm being really the only example from a football perspective. But I think that Purdue's got the right guy out there looking. Last time the trustees were really involved. Whether or not they will be this time around, I don't know. It's probably a good thing for Purdue that the presidential transition happened now as opposed to a couple months from now, because there's not going to be any question about who's running the university. Mike, you guys mentioned his age and how much longer he has. I don't really see a whole lot of sign of him, having one foot out the door here.
No.
So,
that's fairness.
6 years for a football coach, as Jeff Brohm gave Purdue, that's not an insignificant amount of time. I mean, these guys age in dog years, from a job perspective, and being in the same job for 6 years, they're not all going to be Gene Cady. They're not all going to be Matt Painter. They're not all going to be Joe Tiller. Did I say Joe Tiller already?
80th anniversary of his birth today, my friend. Yep.
They're not all going to be those guys you have for anywhere between, 12 and 25 years. So I don't know if Purdue's AD being 65 years old is going to be something that really resonates with the guys he goes and talks to, because they're going to be looking at year one. They're not going to be looking at like year 8. If you get to year 8, you've done a pretty good job, and you probably don't have to worry about who your AD is going to be anyway. So I think this is kind of a lot like recruiting. Like, some of us look at it from, a few steps back, but the people involved probably look at it like what's happening tomorrow. The coaches Purdue's going to talk to are going to look at it like, can I win now? Can I win tomorrow? So I think this is probably a little bit of a secondary concern. I'm not dismissing it entirely, but I think that Mike Babinski has shown he can go out and get good coaches and identify good coaches, and just up to him to do it again.
Yeah, it's got a simple but challenging proposition. Winning now, and again, this is getting, is Purdue's going to have some challenges, obviously, with some potential. But like Tom, you've written, you can turn that roster, but you got a tough schedule next year, without question, with Ohio State and Michigan in that first 7 games. When you get Fresno and Syracuse, I get that. That's all part of it too. But you're right. It's hard to dismiss too. Brohm, 6 years. As Tom, you've written many times, Jim Coletto, Jeff Brohm, Joe Tiller, and Jack Mullenkoff since 1956. I mean, Jim Young was a great coach, only made it 5 years at Purdue. So that's still it's hard to say that's there's no lack of significance of the time spent by Jeff Brohm at Purdue.
No, there's not. And again, like Brian said, 6 years is a long time, man. And a lot's gone on in 6 years. I thought about that a lot, and maybe this seems like the great time to, I guess, drop the mic for Jeff Brohm.
Yeah, I just think so
Leave
too.
at the apex here, and he gets to finally go home. We don't have to hear about it anymore. Sirens wailing. Now he's answering the siren. Finally, everybody's going to be happy. They can skip down to I-65 and do whatever they want to do at Louisville and be on their merry way. More power to them. Again, thanks for what they did, and it just got tiresome, though. The constant.
And I think the Purdue audience got tired of it too, though. Yeah.
Yes,
no question.
That's a big part of this too. Is that this is a good time for both parties. This is a good clean break. Everybody can move on. Everybody knew how this was going to end, and it's better for it to just happen, than to keep playing this "when will it happen" game. The thing at the alumni function last year was. I just wrote my column. I'm sorry, I just completely hijacked this question, but I just wrote in my column that anybody's surprised by this outcome, that's on them, because he's told you what he was going to do without telling you what he was going to do for years now. As soon as he turned down Louisville the first time, there was always that asterisk that was like, well, the timing's not right, which is essentially a translation for, so probably next time. I think he was always going to be the guy who replaced Satterfield whenever that might be. He didn't want to leave Purdue after 2 years, but he also didn't want to take over the mess Bobby Petrino, left. But the comments to the alumni thing last year about, you never know what'll happen. That was him simply playing every side of the fence, making sure that the Louisville people know, hey, I'm still here when you want me. We all know the deal here. We all know Oscar wants him at Louisville. We all know Greg wants him at Louisville. We all know people very, very close to him want him at Louisville.
Brady wants him at Louisville.
Brady wants him at Louisville. They've been telling people for months that they're on their way out. That's not Jeff running around telling people. That's other people, but there's no surprise to any of this here. The only surprise came in how it happened, because Satterfield was fired.
Yeah.
Satterfield was fired halfway through this season, and he pulled the magic trick of getting himself out of the oven to the point where he could actually parlay it into staying ahead of the posse by getting an arguably better job. And that opened it up for Brohm. But this thing fell apart a couple months ago when Satterfield, turned things around. But this was a done deal last year, I think. I think Tyree tried to get this going last year, and the president at Louisville blocked it because they didn't want to move on Satterfield that quickly. But as soon as Satterfield was out the door, this was going to be a done deal. That doesn't mean Jeff Brohm's mind and heart weren't with Purdue for the last 2 seasons. It just means that this has been on the back burner behind the scenes, and this was always how it was going to end. And it just ended in a different way than, people figured it would, but it ended as expected nonetheless. Sorry to have completely hijacked that.
Tom, any last words? And I know you've got more meeting to do.
I got to go.
We appreciate this. There'll be a lot more to talk about this. Obviously, make sure you check out the site. We'll be talking to anybody and everybody that we can in terms of the next phase. All right. So we want to thank acrepro.com, and remember to call 765-587-3185 or visit your local land expert today. We appreciate them. Guys, it's going to be a busy period of time, but we'll look forward to this whole process here down the road. So have a great rest of your Wednesday night. And Brian will have a lot of basketball too as Purdue takes on Hofstra here.
Biggest story of the day.
Yeah, before long. All right. Thanks again. Thanks for watching and listening, and we'll see you down the road.